Hello, dear listener. It's Friday night. The week is finally behind you, and outside, the rain is falling soft and steady, like the city itself is exhaling. I'm so glad you're here. Wherever you are right now, in bed, on the couch, wrapped in blankets, this is exactly where you're meant to be. Tonight I have 5 gentle stories to share with you. 5 quiet moments from Friday nights in the city. Stories about slowing down, letting go, and finding comfort in the small rituals that close out the week. There's nothing you need to do right now. No tasks waiting. No emails to answer. Just you and me and the sound of rain. If you enjoy these rainy bedtime diaries, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so we can share more cozy nights together. But for now, just settle in, get comfortable, let your eyes grow heavy if they want to. The first story is about to begin. It starts in a cinema, just as the last movie of the night is ending, and the rain is waiting outside. There's something sacred about being the last person in a movie theater. I discovered this by accident on a Friday night in late October. The kind of Friday where the week had been so long that I couldn't face going straight home to an empty apartment. I needed something in between, a transition space, somewhere to just exist without anyone needing anything from me. The Avalon Cinema was the oldest movie theater in my neighborhood. Single screen, red velvet seats that had been reupholstered sometime in the 90s. They showed a mix of new releases and classic films, and on Friday nights they always ran a late showing at 10:30. I'd never been to the late showing before. Usually I was the type to catch the 7 o'clock, surrounded by other reasonable adults who wanted to be home by 10. But that night, I walked past the theater around 9:45 and saw the marquee glowing in the rain. They were showing an old French film I'd always meant to watch. Black and white, something about a woman in a bookshop in Paris in the rain. The kind of movie that required a certain mood. And apparently, that Friday night, I was finally in that mood. I bought a ticket from a teenage boy in the booth who looked pleasantly surprised to have a customer. "You're our 5th person tonight," he said. "It's the rain, I think. Keeps people home." The lobby smelled like popcorn and old carpet and something else. Something I could only describe as history. The Avalon had been showing movies since 1947. Generations of people had sat in those velvet seats, escaping into stories on that silver screen. I bought a small popcorn even though I wasn't hungry. It felt like the right thing to do, like part of the ritual. The theater itself was nearly empty, just as the ticket boy had warned. An older couple sat in the front section, their white hair catching the dim light from the wall sconces. A young woman sat alone in the middle, already absorbed in her phone before the preview started. And a man in a coat sat at the very back, the kind of person who looked like he came here often, who knew exactly which seat had the best view. I chose a seat in the back corner, where I could lean against the wall if I wanted. The velvet was soft and slightly worn, the kind of comfortable that only comes from decades of use. The lights dimmed slowly, and I felt my shoulders drop. That first moment of darkness in a theater has always felt magical to me. The world outside stops existing. There's only this room, this screen, this story about to unfold. The film was beautiful. Black and white, Paris, 1962. A woman who worked in a bookshop and fell in love with a poet who visited every Thursday. Nothing dramatic happened. Not really. They talked about books and life, and the way rain changed the city. I ate my popcorn slowly, kernel by kernel. The salt on my fingertips, the butter smell mixing with the dusty velvet of the seat. On screen, the woman stood at her bookshop window and watched the rain fall on Paris streets that looked exactly like they might look today. At some point, I stopped following the plot entirely. My mind drifted in that pleasant way it does when you're deeply relaxed. I thought about my week, all the small stresses that had accumulated, the difficult meeting on Tuesday, the email chain that seemed to never end, the phone call with my mother that had left me feeling inexplicably sad. But here in the dark, none of it could reach me. The theater was a sanctuary. The rain was falling outside. I could hear it faintly on the roof, but inside was warm and safe and timeless. The older couple in the front were holding hands, I noticed. Their silhouettes in the screen's glow. Fingers intertwined. I wondered how many movies they'd watched together over the years. How many Friday nights they'd spent exactly like this. The film ended softly, the way good French films do. No dramatic resolution, just a moment of understanding between the woman and her poet. A kiss in the rain outside the bookshop. And then the credits. White text on black, accompanied by a piano melody that made my chest ache in the best way. Most people leave during the credits. They gather their coats and bags and file out before the house lights come up. But that night, no one moved. The older couple stayed in their seats. The young woman put away her phone and just sat. The man in the coat leaned back and looked at the ceiling. And I stayed too, watching the credits roll, letting the music wash over me. There's something about shared silence that creates connection. We were 5 strangers who had chosen this same rainy Friday night to sit in the dark and watch a beautiful old film. And now we were choosing, together, to let the experience linger. The credits ended and the screen went black. For a moment, we were in complete darkness. Just the sound of rain on the roof and 5 people breathing. Then the house lights came up slowly, warm amber sconces glowing against the walls. The spell was gently broken, but not harshly. We gathered our things in that unhurried way of people with nowhere particular to be. In the lobby, the older couple was talking to the ticket boy, asking about next week's showings. They're doing a Hitchcock double feature, he said. Starts at 8. The woman's face lit up. Rear Window? That's the one. I stood by the door, looking out at the rain. It was falling harder now. The street shining like glass under the streetlights. I'd have to make a run for it, or wait it out. The young woman came to stand beside me. She pulled an umbrella from her bag, a bright yellow one that seemed impossibly cheerful for such a gray night. Need to share? She asked. I'm heading toward the subway. That's kind of you, I said, but I think I'm going to wait a bit. Let the rain settle. She nodded like she understood perfectly. Enjoy the rest of your night. You too. She stepped out into the rain, her yellow umbrella a spot of color moving down the gray street. I watched her until she turned the corner, and then I was alone in the lobby with the ticket boy and the smell of popcorn. We're open for another 20 minutes, he said, if you want to wait out the rain. Thank you. I wandered the lobby, looking at the framed posters on the walls. Old movies, classic films that had played here over the decades. Casablanca, 1954. Roman Holiday, 1961, Emily, 2002. Each poster was a time capsule, a reminder that people had been coming here to escape into stories for almost 80 years. I wondered how many of them had stood in this exact spot on a rainy Friday night. How many of them had felt exactly what I was feeling: grateful, peaceful, quietly content. The ticket boy was sweeping the floor now, a routine closing task. He moved methodically, the broom making soft swishing sounds against the patterned carpet. An old radio on the counter was playing jazz, something with a saxophone and a gentle piano. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He looked up, not unfriendly. "Sure. Do you ever watch the movies? Or does working here make them feel less special?" He thought about it, leaning on his broom. "I catch pieces of them," he said, "through the door. And honestly, it never gets old. There's something about this place, you know? The way people look when they come out of a good movie. Like they've been somewhere else for 2 hours." I nodded. "That's exactly how I feel right now. That's the point, right? That's why this place has been here so long." The rain was letting up outside. I could see the drops getting smaller, the puddles settling. Time to go. But I didn't feel rushed. I bought a bag of popcorn for the road, left over from the night's batch, half price. The ticket boy handed it to me with a smile. "Come back for the Hitchcock," he said. "I will." The street was quieter now, the late hour having cleared most of the Friday night crowds. I walked slowly, eating popcorn from the bag, letting the damp air cool my face. The marquee lights reflected in the puddles, wavering gold and white. I thought about the French film, about the woman and her poet, about the way stories can make you feel less alone, even when you're sitting in a dark room surrounded by strangers. About how sometimes the best Friday night isn't loud or exciting or full of plans. Sometimes it's just this: a quiet theater, a beautiful old film, the rain outside and the warm light inside. I walked home through streets I'd walked 100 times. They looked different after the movie. More romantic somehow. More like Paris in 1962. I half expected to see a poet waiting at a bookshop window, watching for someone he loved. My apartment was cold when I got home, but not unpleasantly so. I turned on a few lamps instead of the overhead light, made myself a cup of tea, stood at my window and watched the rain that was still falling, gentler now. The week was over. 2 days of nothing stretched ahead. No alarms, no obligations, no one needing anything from me. I thought about the Avalon, about its worn velvet seats and its history on the walls, about the older couple holding hands and the ticket boy sweeping the floor, about the young woman with the yellow umbrella who had offered to share. Small moments, all of them. Nothing that would make a headline or change the world, but woven together, they made a Friday night that felt gentle and complete. I finished my tea and went to bed early, my body tired in that good way that comes from finally letting go of a long week. The rain was still tapping at my window as I fell asleep. And in my dreams, I was back in Paris, 1962, watching the rain fall on cobblestone streets, waiting for a poet who knew I would be there. The theater stayed with me for days after that. I went back for the Hitchcock double feature, just as I'd promised. And then again for a Japanese film about a woman making tofu. And again, until Friday nights at the Avalon became a ritual I looked forward to all week. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we stumble into. The random left turn instead of right. The rainy Friday night that could have been spent on the couch with a laptop, but instead became something more. A tradition, a sanctuary, a place where the week ends softly and the stories carry you somewhere else. And speaking of Friday nights and letting the week go, the rain has its own way of drawing us out into the night sometimes, even when we thought we were done with the world. Sometimes there's one more small adventure waiting. I hadn't planned on leaving the apartment again. It was already past 11, and I'd changed into my softest pajamas, the ones with the faded stars that I'd had since college. I'd brushed my teeth. I'd turned off most of the lights. For all practical purposes, my Friday night was complete. But then I opened the refrigerator to get a glass of water, and I saw it, the nearly empty milk carton, the complete absence of anything that could be called breakfast food. And I thought about Saturday morning, about waking up slow with coffee and toast, and I knew I didn't want to face tomorrow without the ingredients for that quiet ritual. The convenience store was only 2 blocks away, open 24 hours, run by a family who had owned it for 3 generations. I'd walked past it 1,000 times, but I rarely went in so late. I put on real pants over my pajamas, a sweatshirt, old and comfortable, my raincoat over everything, hood up against the drizzle that was still falling, sneakers without socks, because this was just a quick run, nothing serious. The streets were quiet in that particular late Friday night way. Earlier, they would have been full of people heading to bars and restaurants. But now, the first wave of nightlife had subsided, and the next wave, the late-night crowd, hadn't quite emerged yet. I walked through puddles I would normally avoid, my sneakers getting damp but not soaked. The rain was light enough that I didn't really need my hood, but I kept it up anyway. There's something about being cocooned in a raincoat late at night. It makes you feel invisible, anonymous, free. The convenience store's sign glowed like a beacon at the end of the block. Red and white neon, slightly flickering. The windows were bright against the dark street, promising warmth and snacks and all the small things you might suddenly realize you need. A bell chimed when I pushed open the door. The warm air hit my face immediately, carrying the smell of hot food and coffee, and something sweet. Maybe the pastries in the case by the register. The store was almost empty at this hour. A young man in a delivery uniform was grabbing an energy drink from the refrigerated section. An older woman was carefully selecting bananas near the produce area. And behind the counter, Mr. Park was reading a newspaper, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. I'd never actually learned his name. I just thought of him as Mr. Park, because that was the name on the sign outside. Park's Convenience, Estadir, 1978. He'd been there every time I'd ever come in, day or night, as if he never left. He looked up when the bell chimed and nodded at me. "Rainy night," he observed. "It is. Good for sleeping. That's the plan." He went back to his newspaper, satisfied with our exchange. That was one of the things I appreciated about this store. You could be as social or as silent as you wanted. No one pushed. I grabbed a basket and wandered the aisle slowly. There was no rush. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, a sound I found strangely comforting. The shelves were packed with an impossible variety of things. Snacks from a dozen countries, toiletries, batteries, greeting cards, sewing kits. I picked up the milk I'd come for, and then bread, the kind with seeds that I liked, eggs, because I might want to make an omelet, a small container of strawberries that looked surprisingly fresh. My basket was filling up with things I hadn't known I wanted until I saw them. A bar of dark chocolate with sea salt, a packet of chamomile tea I hadn't tried before, a small jar of honey with a honeycomb pattern on the lid. This was the danger of late-night convenience store runs. Everything looked appealing under the bright lights. Every product seemed to whisper, "You deserve this. It's Friday." I paused in front of the hot food case near the register. There were meat buns keeping warm under the lights, and egg sandwiches wrapped in plastic in small containers of fried rice that had been there since the dinner rush. "The meat buns are fresh," Mr. Park said, without looking up from his newspaper. "Made them an hour ago. The fried rice, not so much." I laughed. "Thank you for the honesty. No point in lying. You'd find out anyway." I added 2 meat buns to my basket, not because I was hungry, but because they smelled good and they'd be perfect tomorrow, reheated for a late breakfast or early lunch. The older woman with the bananas had moved to the checkout. Mr. Park set down his newspaper to ring her up, moving with the efficiency of someone who had done this exact task a million times. "How's your daughter?" the woman asked. Good. She's in medical school now, 3rd year. "We must be so proud. Very proud. Very tired, too. Tuition is not cheap." They laughed together, the easy laugh of people who had known each other for years. I stood behind them, not impatient, just listening. There was a whole world of stories in this small store. Relationships that had grown over decades of bananas and milk and late-night conversations. The woman left with a wave, her plastic bag rustling. I set my basket on the counter, and Mr. Park began scanning items. "Friday night grocery run," he observed. I realized I had nothing for breakfast. Important meal. Most important. He packed my things into a paper bag with practiced hands. The chocolate went in first, then the bread on top so it wouldn't get crushed. The meat buns got their own smaller bag to keep them warm. "You live nearby?" he asked. 2 blocks. "Good. Not far in the rain. I see you sometimes walking past in the mornings." I was surprised he recognized me. I was one of dozens, maybe hundreds, of people who walked past his store every day. But he'd noticed. He'd remembered. "You always look like you're thinking hard," he said, very serious face in the mornings. "Work stress, probably. Tonight you look more relaxed. Friday face is different." He handed me the bag, and I handed him the money. The transaction was simple, but it felt like more than that, like a small acknowledgement of shared existence. I see you. You see me. We're both here on this rainy Friday night. "Come back soon," he said. "I'll have fresh meat buns on Sunday, too." "I will." The bell chimed again as I left, and the cool, damp air wrapped around me. The rain had almost stopped now, just a fine mist drifting under the streetlights. My paper bag was warm against my chest from the meat buns. I walked home slowly, not because I had to, but because the night was beautiful. The wet streets reflected every light, the neon signs, the traffic signals, the windows of apartments where people were still awake. A cat watched me from under a parked car, its eyes glowing green. At the corner, I passed a couple sharing an umbrella, laughing at something one of them had said. Their joy was contagious, and I found myself smiling too. Friday night in the city. Everyone with their own story, their own destination, their own reasons for being out in the rain. My building lobby was warm and dry. The familiar smell of old carpet and someone's cooking lingering in the air. I took the stairs slowly, my grocery bag rustling with each step. Back in my apartment, I unpacked my haul onto the kitchen counter. The milk went in the fridge, the bread in the bread box. The strawberries stayed on the counter so I'd remember to eat them tomorrow. I ate one of the meat buns standing at the window, watching the rain that had picked up again. Mr. Park was right. They were fresh, the dough soft and slightly sweet, the filling savory and warm. The kind of food that feels like comfort even when you didn't know you needed comforting. I thought about his store, about how it had been there for over 40 years. Through so many changes in the neighborhood, so many new buildings going up and old ones coming down, through rain and snow and endless summer heat. Always there, always open, always warm. There's something grounding about that kind of permanence, something reassuring about knowing that at any hour of the day or night, you can walk 2 blocks and find milk and bread and meat buns kept warm under heat lamps. I finished my meat bun and washed my hands. Made myself a cup of the new chamomile tea, which smelled like honey and flowers. Added some of the actual honey from the jar with the honeycomb pattern. The tea was perfect. Sweet, but not too sweet. Warm and calming. Exactly what a rainy Friday night called for. I thought about Mr. Park's observation, that my Friday face was different from my morning face. More relaxed, he'd said. Less like I was thinking hard about something. He was right, probably. The week strips something from you, bit by bit. Energy, patience, the ability to be fully present. And then Friday night comes, and slowly, you get to put those pieces back. A movie in an old theater, a walk in the rain, a conversation with a convenience store owner who remembers your face. Small things, ordinary things, but they add up to something that feels like restoration. I finished my tea and rinsed the cup. The rain was still falling, steady now, a rhythm I'd fall asleep to. My apartment was warm, and I was full, and the weekend stretched ahead, with nothing but possibility. I didn't turn on the TV or pick up my phone. Instead, I just sat by the window for a while, watching the rain and the lights, and the occasional person with an umbrella hurrying past. Not thinking about anything in particular, just being. That's the gift of Friday night, really. Permission to just be. Not productive, not efficient, not working toward any goal. Just existing in the moment, in the rain, in the soft glow of a city settling into sleep. Eventually, I'd make my way to bed. But first, I had one more thing to do. One more small Friday night ritual. The balcony was calling, and the rain was waiting. And that's where the next story takes us, dear listener. Out onto a small balcony, into the cool, damp air, where the whole city seems to whisper secrets meant just for you. My balcony wasn't much. Just a narrow rectangle of concrete, maybe 4 feet by 8 feet. Enough space for one chair, a tiny table, and a collection of plants that had somehow survived my inconsistent care. When I'd moved into this apartment 3 years ago, I wasn't sure I'd ever use it. But the balcony had become my favorite place, especially on nights like this, especially in the rain. I slid open the glass door and stepped out into the damp air. The rain was falling steadily, but not hard. The kind of rain that makes you feel refreshed rather than drenched. The awning above gave me just enough cover to stay mostly dry, though a fine mist reached my face and hands. I settled into my chair, a wicker thing I'd found at a flea market years ago, softened now with cushions and a wool blanket I kept folded over the back. The cushion was slightly damp from the humidity, but I didn't mind. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and let myself sink into the familiar comfort. From 4 floors up, I could see a slice of the city I loved. The street below with its glistening pavement and occasional passing car. The apartment building across the way, windows lit in patches, someone cooking late, someone watching TV, someone just starting their night while I was ending mine. The rain made everything look softer, edges blurred, lights smeared. The hard angles of the city gentled into watercolor impressions. I could hear it falling on the awning above me, on the plants in their pots, on the railing where it collected into small streams that dripped to the balcony below. There was a particular music to rain, I'd learned, not just the sound itself, but the rhythm of it, the way it rose and fell, like breathing. Sometimes a gust of wind would intensify it for a moment, and then it would settle again into its steady pattern. I closed my eyes and just listened. The rain on the awning, a car passing on the wet street below, music from somewhere nearby, someone else with their window open, letting Friday night in. The distant rumble of the city's endless activity, muffled but never quite silent. When I was younger, I always needed to fill silence with something. Music, podcasts, television, the voices of friends. Silence felt threatening, like something that could swallow me whole. But somewhere along the way, I'd learned to be comfortable with quiet, to appreciate the space it created, to understand that silence wasn't empty. It was just room for other things, thoughts, feelings, the small sounds that were always there if you stopped talking long enough to hear them. I opened my eyes and looked at my plants. The rain was good for them, I told myself, even though I was the one who should have been watering them more regularly. There was the rosemary bush that had grown far larger than I'd expected. The small pot of lavender that my mother had given me on my last birthday. The succulent that had mysteriously survived 4 years of neglect and was now producing tiny pink flowers. I loved how the raindrops sat on the succulent's thick leaves, perfect spheres of water, catching the light from the street below. Nature's jewelry, temporary and beautiful. A movement caught my eye on the balcony across the way. Someone else had stepped outside, a few floors up in the building opposite mine. I could see their silhouette against the light from their apartment. Someone wrapping themselves in something, settling into a chair of their own. We were both doing the same thing, I realized. Both watching the rain. Both finding peace in this moment between Friday's responsibilities and Saturday's freedom. I wondered about their week, whether it had been as long as mine, whether they had their own cinema moments and convenience store conversations, their own small rituals that made the hard parts bearable. They probably weren't thinking about me at all. Just a distant figure on a distant balcony, barely visible in the rain. But there was something comforting about knowing someone else was out there, watching the same rain, breathing the same wet air, letting the same Friday night settle over them. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and let my mind wander. I thought about the apartment I'd lived in before this one. A basement unit with no outdoor space at all. I'd spent 2 years there, saving money, dreaming of exactly this. A place with a window that opened, with a balcony where I could sit outside and feel the weather. When I'd finally moved here, when I'd first stepped onto this small concrete rectangle, I'd nearly cried. It was everything I'd wanted. Just a few feet of outdoor space, but it was mine. I thought about all the mornings I'd had coffee out here, watching the sun come up. All the evenings I'd read books until the light faded. All the phone calls with faraway friends, pacing the 4 feet of space while we caught up on each other's lives. So much had happened on this tiny balcony. I'd cried here after hard days. I'd laughed here with friends who visited. I'd watched fireworks on New Year's Eve and thunderstorms in summer, and the first snow of winter drifting down like confetti. And now this, a rainy Friday night in late autumn. Nothing special happening, nothing dramatic, nothing I'd tell anyone about tomorrow. Just me and the rain and the city going about its business below. A gust of wind sent rain under the awning, misting my face. I didn't move to shield myself. The water felt good on my skin, clean and cool and alive. I thought about how rain was just water that had been everywhere. Oceans and rivers and clouds and other people's balconies. A continuous cycle, ancient and endless. The same water that fell on me now might have once fallen on mountains I'd never see, on cities I'd never visit, on people whose names I'd never know. There was something humbling about that, and something connecting. Like the rain was a thread woven through all of time and space. And for this moment, I was part of that weaving. The person on the opposite balcony had gone back inside. Their light was still on, but the door was closed now. I was alone again, but it didn't feel lonely. Alone and lonely are different things, I'd learned. Alone could be peaceful. Alone could be chosen. Alone could be exactly what you needed after a week of being not alone, of meetings and emails and small talk with colleagues you didn't really know. I checked my phone for the first time in hours. A few notifications, nothing urgent, a text from a friend asking if I wanted to get brunch tomorrow, an email from a store I'd once bought shoes from. Nothing that needed answering tonight. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked up at the sky. No stars tonight, of course. Just the uniform gray of rain clouds, lit from below by the city's glow. The clouds moved slowly, pushed by winds I couldn't feel at a street level. I wondered where this rain had come from. What ocean? What distant coast? How far it had traveled to fall on my balcony on this particular Friday night. The rain continued, steady and patient. It would rain all night, according to the forecast. I'd fall asleep to this sound and wake up to it still falling, or maybe just finishing, the streets wet and clean and new. I yawned, finally feeling the tiredness that had been building all day. Time to go inside, soon. Time to finish closing out the week. But first, I just wanted a few more minutes, a few more breaths of this damp air, a few more drops of rain on my outstretched palm. The lavender plant was releasing its scent, activated by the rain and humidity. I leaned closer and breathed it in, my mother's voice in my head. Lavender is good for sleeping. Put some under your pillow. I picked a small sprig, rubbing the tiny flowers between my fingers, The scent intensified, clean and herbal and calming. I'd put it on my nightstand, fall asleep, breathing it in. The street below was quiet now. No more passing cars. No more hurrying pedestrians. The city was settling into its late-night rhythm. Bars still open, clubs still thumping somewhere in the distance. But my neighborhood was slowing down. I thought about all the people sleeping in the buildings around me, dreams unfolding behind closed curtains, children breathing softly in their small beds, couples curled together against the rain, old people who had seen 1,000 Friday nights and would see 1,000 more. We were all here together in this city, in this rain, strangers who shared walls and streets and weather, never speaking, mostly, but connected nonetheless. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting the movement after sitting so long in the cool air. The blanket was damp now, and I'd need to bring it inside to dry. My lavender sprig was soft in my palm. One last look at the rain, one last breath of the wet night air, and then inside, where it was warm and dry, and the weekend waited. I slid the glass door closed behind me and watched the rain continue through the window. From inside, it looked different, more distant, more like watching a movie than being in one. But I could still hear it, muffled through the glass. The apartment was quiet and warm. All the lights I'd left on earlier seemed too bright now, after the gentle darkness of the balcony. I dimmed them one by one, creating softness. The meat bun from earlier had settled in my stomach. The tea was long finished, the cup still by the sink. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, exactly as it should be. I put the lavender sprig in a small vase on my nightstand. Its scent filled the bedroom immediately, light and sweet. My mother would be pleased. I changed into proper pajamas. The star ones were damp from my balcony adventure. Found fresh ones, flannel with small moons, equally old and equally comfortable. Slipped into bed and pulled the covers up. The rain continued outside. I could hear it through the wall, a constant, gentle rhythm. My eyes were heavy now, finally ready for sleep. But before I drifted off, I reached for my phone one more time. Not to scroll or stress or check work emails, just to call someone. Someone whose voice I suddenly wanted to hear. And that's where the next story finds us, dear listener. In bed, in the rain, with a phone call about to begin. Because sometimes the best part of Friday night is the people we choose to share it with, even from far away. I called my sister. I hadn't planned to. We usually talked on Sunday afternoons, a standing appointment that had developed over years of living in different cities. But tonight, in the rain, with the lavender on my nightstand, I wanted to hear her voice. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, is everything okay? Her first instinct, always, was concern. An unexpected call meant something was wrong. Everything's fine, I said. I just wanted to talk. A pause, and then I could hear her smile through the phone. Really? That's nice. Give me a second to get comfortable. I heard rustling on her end, blankets, pillows being rearranged. She was in bed too, probably. Same time zone, same Friday night exhaustion, same relief at the week being over. Okay, she said. I'm settled. Tell me about your week. And so I did. Not the big things, those we'd covered in our Sunday calls, but the small things. The difficult meeting on Tuesday that had left me feeling inadequate. the sandwich I'd discovered at a new place near work, the moment on Wednesday when the sunset had caught me off guard, painting my office window gold. She listened the way she always did, actively, with small sounds of acknowledgement. And oh no, and that sounds good. Letting me know she was there, that she was paying attention. When I finished, she told me about her week, the student who had finally grasped a concept she'd been teaching for months, the fight with her husband over something silly, whose turn it was to call the plumber, that had blown over by dinner, the new coffee shop that had opened near her school. Her life was so different from mine. Married, with a house in the suburbs, 2 cats, a career in education. My life was single, urban, a career that sometimes felt more like survival than purpose. But talking to her, I never felt the distance. We were the same 2 girls who had shared a bedroom for 18 years, who knew each other's dreams and fears, and the exact pitch of each other's laugh. "Is it raining there?" she asked. "All night. It's beautiful." I love that. We had rain earlier, but it stopped. I missed the sound. I held my phone near the window so she could hear it, the steady rhythm, the gentle tapping. She was quiet for a moment, just listening. "Remember when we were kids," she said, "when we'd listen to rain on the roof of our bedroom? That old house had that skylight that leaked a little, and Dad put a bucket under it, and the dripping was like a metronome all night. I remember. I used to fall asleep counting the drips. Me too. It drove Mom crazy, that leak, but I loved it. We fell into memory together. The house we'd grown up in, long since sold to another family. The backyard with the apple tree that never produced edible fruit. The kitchen where our mother had taught us to cook, and our father had taught us to fix things. Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The house?" "All of it. Being young, being together, not having to think about bills and jobs and all the adult stuff." I thought about it. Really thought. "Sometimes," I said, "but mostly I like now. I like that we're both doing our own things, living our own lives, and that we can still talk like this. That's true. This is nice. It is." We talked about our parents next. Dad's retirement plans, which changed every week. Mom's new hobby of bird watching, which had resulted in 3 expensive pairs of binoculars and a notebook filled with species she'd spotted. "She sent me a picture yesterday," my sister said. "A blue jay in the backyard. She was so excited. I didn't have the heart to tell her blue jays are extremely common." I laughed. Let her have her joy. Oh, I did. I replied with 3 heart emojis and told her it was beautiful. We talked about her cats, both of whom were apparently sleeping on her lap as we spoke, creating what she called a furnace of fur. About her husband, who was downstairs watching a documentary about submarines. About my potential trip to visit them next month, which we'd been planning vaguely for weeks. "You should definitely come," she said. "I'll make your favorite pasta. We can drink wine and talk until midnight like we used to." That sounds perfect. The rain was still falling outside my window. I'd been on the phone for almost an hour now, but it felt like minutes. That's the thing about talking to someone who really knows you. Time moves differently. "Are you getting sleepy?" she asked. "A little." "Me too. The cats are like a sleeping potion." Neither of us wanted to hang up, though. There was something precious about this call, about the spontaneous Friday night connection that wasn't on our usual schedule. "Do you remember," I said, "when we'd have sleepovers in each other's rooms, even though we had our own beds? We'd drag pillows and blankets across the hall and set up camp on the floor. Yes. And we'd stay up way too late whispering about nothing. Mom always knew, I think, but she never stopped us. She probably appreciated the break. 2 kids in one room meant more quiet in the rest of the house. We laughed together, that synchronized sister laugh we'd perfected over decades. Same pitch, same rhythm, same breath. People used to ask if we were twins. "This is nice," she said again. "I'm glad you called." "Me too. I don't know why I don't do it more often. We should make a rule. Random Friday calls. Just whenever we feel like it. I like that rule." We talked a little more about nothing and everything, the way only people who've known each other their whole lives can. About the weird dream she'd had earlier in the week. About my neighbor's dog who barked every morning at exactly 6:15. About the show we were both watching, careful not to spoil anything for each other. Eventually, the pauses between topics got longer. The kind of comfortable silence that means you're ready to say goodbye, but you're savoring the last few moments first. "Okay," she finally said. "I'm going to fall asleep mid-sentence if I don't hang up soon. The cats have defeated me." "Same. The rain is like a lullaby." "I love you," she said. "Have a good weekend." "I love you too. Give the cats a pat from me." "I'll try. They're very territorial about pets." We said goodnight the way we always did, slowly, with a few more exchanges that weren't strictly necessary, but felt important anyway. And then the phone went quiet, and I was alone again with the rain. But I didn't feel alone. My sister's voice was still in my head, warm and familiar. All those memories we'd stirred up were floating around the room like friendly ghosts. I set my phone on the nightstand next to the lavender. The screen went dark. And the room was filled with soft shadows and the sound of rain. I thought about how lucky I was to have someone I could call on a random Friday night. Someone who would pick up, who would get comfortable, who would say, "Tell me about your week," and actually mean it. Not everyone had that. I knew plenty of people who had grown apart from their siblings, or never had any to begin with. A connection like mine and my sister's wasn't automatic. It was something we'd cultivated, tended, chosen again and again. I made a mental note to be more spontaneous about it, to call when I felt like calling, not just when it was scheduled, to send random texts that said nothing but "thinking of you," to never take for granted the people who loved me just because they were always there. The rain continued its steady song outside. I was deeply tired now, the good kind of tired that means sleep will come easily. But I didn't close my eyes just yet. There was one more small ritual, one more tiny act of care that would close out this soft Friday night. Something I did every week, without fail, because it mattered. And that's what the final story is about. Dear listener, a simple thing, clean sheets, and why sometimes the smallest rituals carry the most meaning, and sometimes the most profound comfort comes not from grand gestures or special occasions, but from the smallest rituals we create for ourselves, the ones that say quietly, gently, "I care about myself. I deserve softness." This is a story about clean sheets on a Friday night, about the simple act of preparing a sanctuary, and about learning to give myself the tenderness I so easily give to others. The rain had been falling all day, not heavy rain, but persistent, the kind that creates a constant gentle whisper against windows and rooftops. the kind that makes everything feel softer, slower, more contained. I'd come home from work around 6, my umbrella dripping in the hallway, my coat damp at the shoulders. The week had been long, but not terrible. Just the usual accumulation of meetings and deadlines and small stresses that build up like static electricity. But now it was Friday evening, and I had nowhere to be, nothing to do. No one expecting anything from me until Monday morning. The relief of that felt almost physical, like setting down a bag I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. My apartment was quiet. I lived alone, had for almost 3 years now. A 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of an old building that creaked in the wind but had good bones. High ceilings, wooden floors, windows that let in good light when there was light to let in. Tonight the windows showed only gray and rain, but that was fine. That was perfect. Actually, rain meant staying in. Rain meant permission to be still. I kicked off my work shoes and left them by the door, hung my damp coat on the hook where it could drip onto the mat, walked in my socks to the kitchen and put the kettle on, mostly out of habit. While the water heated, I stood at the window and watched the rain. The street below was slick and shining, reflecting the traffic lights in smears of red and green. A few people hurried by with umbrellas, heads down, rushing toward Friday night plans. I had no plans, and that was the plan. The kettle clicked off, and I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. Not because I particularly loved chamomile, but because it felt like the right thing. A Friday night chamomile kind of evening. Gentle, uncaffeinated, soft. I carried the tea to my bedroom and set it on the nightstand. Then I looked at my bed. The sheets had been on for almost 2 weeks. Not dirty, exactly, but not fresh either. That slightly rumpled, lived-in look that happens when you've been too tired or too busy to do laundry. A thought formed in my mind. Clean sheets. Tonight. Fresh, crisp, lovely clean sheets to sink into on a rainy Friday night. It felt almost decadent, which was silly, really. It was just laundry. Just a basic household task that everyone does. But there was something about doing it now, tonight, with intention. Not because the sheets were dirty and I had to, but because fresh sheets would feel wonderful. Because I deserved that small luxury. I pulled the old sheets off the bed in one satisfying motion. They came away easily, pooling in a soft heap on the floor. The mattress looked bare and patient, waiting to be dressed again. My linen closet was in the hallway, a narrow door that stuck slightly when the humidity was high. I tugged it open and breathed in the smell of clean fabric and lavender sachets. My mother had taught me to keep lavender sachets with the linens. It was one of those small habits I'd kept without really thinking about it. I reached for my favorite sheets, white cotton with a subtle texture, soft from many washings. They'd been a gift to myself last winter, bought during a sale at a store I normally couldn't afford. A small splurge that had proven worth every penny. Back in the bedroom, I shook out the fitted sheet. It billowed in the air like a sail and settled over the mattress. I walked around the bed, tucking each corner carefully. There was something meditative about the motion. Lift, stretch, tuck. Lift, stretch, tuck. The rain continued outside, steady and soothing. I could hear it against the window, a soft percussion that made the quiet work feel even more peaceful. Next came the flat sheet. I spread it evenly, smoothing out the wrinkles with my palms. The fabric was cool to the touch, crisp in that way only freshly laundered cotton can be. In a few hours, it would warm to my body temperature and become cozy. But for now, it was pleasantly cool, a promise of comfort waiting to unfold. I thought about all the Friday nights I'd spent differently, years of going out, making plans, filling weekends with activity and noise. And they had been good, many of them. I wasn't someone who regretted adventures or social nights. But somewhere along the way, I'd learned to love this too. The quiet Friday, the intentional staying in, the rituals of solitary comfort that didn't feel lonely, just peaceful. I fetched the pillowcases next, 2 of them matching the sheets. I had an extra pillow that I use for reading in bed, and I decided to put a fresh case on that one too. Why not? It was that kind of night. Stuffing pillows into pillowcases is one of those tasks that sounds simple, but always takes longer than expected. I fumbled with the corners, trying to get them aligned properly. The pillow kept bunching up in the wrong places. I laughed at myself, alone in my bedroom, wrestling with a pillow. It felt silly in the best way. No one watching, no one judging. Just me and my small domestic battle. Eventually, all 3 pillows were properly dressed and arranged at the head of the bed. I stepped back to admire my work. The bed looked beautiful, really beautiful. White sheets pulled smooth, pillows fluffy and inviting, everything clean and fresh and waiting. It looked like a bed in a hotel, or like a photograph from one of those home magazines I sometimes flip through at the dentist's office. The kind of bed that makes you want to immediately climb in and never leave. But not yet. First, there were other rituals to complete. I gathered the old sheets from the floor and carried them to the laundry basket. Then I went to the bathroom and started running a bath. A bath before bed on clean sheets. The thought made me smile. I was being very kind to myself tonight. Very intentionally, consciously kind. While the tub filled, I lit the candle that lived on the bathroom counter. It was almost burned down, just an inch or 2 of wax left, but it still flickered to life when I touched the match to the wick. The scent was vanilla and something woody, warm and comforting without being too sweet. I added bath salts to the water, lavender, matching the sachets in my linen closet. Maybe I had a theme tonight. Maybe I was becoming my mother in the best possible way. The bathroom filled with steam and soft fragrance. I could still hear the rain through the small bathroom window, which I had left cracked open despite the cold. The contrast of warm steam inside and cool rain air from outside felt luxurious. I undressed slowly, folding my work clothes neatly instead of dropping them on the floor. Part of the ritual, treating everything with a little more care than usual. The water was perfect when I stepped in, hot enough to make my skin tingle, but not scalding. I sank down slowly, letting my body adjust to the temperature. The candle flickered, the rain whispered. The water held me like a warm embrace. I lay back and closed my eyes. Baths are interesting. They force you to be still in a way that showers don't. In a shower, you're always doing something. Washing, rinsing, moving. But in a bath, you just are. You float. You exist. You let the water hold your weight. I thought about the week that had just ended. The meetings, the deadlines, the small frustrations. I let them rise to the surface of my mind and then watch them dissolve, like the bath salts in the water. There was a presentation on Tuesday that hadn't gone perfectly. I'd stumbled over a few words, lost my train of thought once. It had bothered me for hours afterward, replaying the moment in my head. But now, in the warm water, it seemed so small. Nobody remembered it except me, and even I was starting to forget. Wednesday, there had been a tense email exchange with a colleague. Nothing serious, just a misunderstanding about a deadline. But it had left me feeling prickly for the rest of the day. That too seemed distant now. The water smoothed everything away. The week's edges softened into vague shapes that no longer had the power to bother me. I stayed in the bath until my fingers started to prune and the water began to cool. Then I pulled the plug and listened to the satisfying gurgle of water draining. It felt symbolic somehow. The week going down the drain, leaving me clean and fresh. I wrapped myself in my biggest towel, the one that was almost comically oversized. It had been a gift from my sister, who knew I loved feeling cocooned in fabric. I stood in the steamy bathroom for a moment, just breathing, just existing in the warm space between bath and bed. The candle was almost out now, just a tiny flame clinging to the last of the wick. I blew it out gently and watched the smoke curl toward the ceiling. In my bedroom, I put on my softest pajamas, the flannel ones with the tiny stars, faded from many washings. They were old and shapeless and absolutely perfect. The rain was still falling. I went to the window and looked out at the wet city for a moment. The street had grown quieter as the evening deepened. Most people were inside now, settled into their own Friday night rituals. I thought about all the windows I could see from here, all the little lit rectangles in the buildings across the way, each one containing a life, a story, a person doing their own version of winding down. There was something comforting about that, being alone, but not isolated. Part of a city full of people all breathing and existing together, even in separate rooms. I pulled the curtains closed, leaving just a small gap where I could still see the rain on the glass. Then I turned down my bed. The moment I pulled back the covers, I felt a rush of anticipation. Such a silly thing to be excited about. Clean sheets. Just fabric that had been through a washing machine. But when I slid into the bed, I understood why the anticipation had been warranted. The sheets were cool and crisp against my warm, bath-softened skin. They smelled like lavender and freshness, like new beginnings. They made a satisfying swishing sound as I adjusted my legs, getting comfortable. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and lay there, just feeling it all. The weight of the covers, the softness of the pillow, the gentle patter of rain outside, the deep, bone-level relaxation of Friday night. My chamomile tea was still on the nightstand, now cool, but still drinkable. I propped myself up and took a few sips. It was mild and slightly floral, soothing in its gentleness. I'd brought a book to bed, something light and easy. A novel I'd been working through slowly, a chapter here and there before sleep. I picked it up now and found my place. Reading in bed on clean sheets, with rain falling outside and nowhere to be in the morning. It was such a simple combination of elements, but together they created something that felt almost sacred. I read slowly, letting the words wash over me without rushing. The story was about a woman who ran a small bookshop in a coastal town. Nothing dramatic happened in it, just the quiet rhythm of her days, her relationships, her thoughts. It was the kind of book that felt like a friend, the kind you could pick up and put down without losing anything, the kind that didn't demand your attention but rewarded it gently when you gave it. After a while, my eyes started to grow heavy. The words on the page began to blur slightly at the edges. I caught myself reading the same paragraph twice without absorbing it. That was the signal. Time to stop reading. Time to let sleep come. I placed the book on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but not completely. A soft glow came through the gap in the curtains, streetlight and rain mixing into something luminous. I lay on my back for a moment, looking at the ceiling. Then I turned onto my side, my favorite sleeping position, curled slightly, one hand under my pillow, facing the window where the rain was visible. The sheets rustled as I moved, that crisp, clean sound. Already they were warming to my body temperature, becoming soft and cozy. The transition from cool to warm felt like the sheets were welcoming me, adjusting to my presence, making space for me. I thought about the morning ahead, Saturday morning. No alarm set. I would wake when my body was ready, not when a clock demanded it. Maybe I would make coffee and sit by the window. Maybe I would stay in bed for an extra hour, reading more of my book. Maybe the rain would still be falling, and I would watch it with the particular pleasure of someone who has nowhere to go. But that was tomorrow. Right now, there was just this bed, these sheets, this rain, this perfect Friday night coming to its gentle close. My body felt heavy in the best way, that pleasant heaviness of true relaxation, every muscle loosening, every thought softening. The rain was still falling outside, steady and faithful. It had been falling all day, and it would probably fall all night. I liked that, the constancy of it, the way it wrapped around my apartment building like a blanket. I thought about how lucky I was, not in any grand way, not compared to some imaginary ideal life, just lucky in the small ways that actually matter. A warm bed, a safe home, clean sheets that smelled like lavender, the ability to give myself kindness, to create rituals of comfort, to treat myself gently after a long week. These weren't things I'd always known how to do. For years, I'd pushed through tiredness instead of resting, ignored what my body needed in favor of what seemed productive or expected, treated self-care as optional, even indulgent. But somewhere along the way, I'd learned, maybe from getting older, maybe from burning out and having to rebuild, maybe just from paying attention to what actually made me feel good, not what I thought should make me feel good. Clean sheets on a Friday night, a bath with lavender salts, chamomile tea, and a gentle book. These were my rituals now, small ceremonies of self-kindness. My eyes were fully closed now. I could feel sleep approaching, not rushing, but coming steadily, like the rain, gentle and persistent and impossible to resist. My thoughts began to drift and blur, the boundary between awake and asleep growing soft and porous. Images floated through my mind, the candle flame, the bath water, the white expanse of fresh sheets. I thought about other people, other Friday nights, happening all around the city. Friends gathering in warm restaurants, couples walking through the rain with linked arms. People like me, home alone, finding contentment in solitude. None of these ways of being was better than another. They were all just different verses of the same song. The song of Friday night, the song of the week ending and the weekend beginning, the song of rest and renewal. My breathing had slowed without me noticing, deep and even and rhythmic, matching the rain somehow, or the rain matching me. I was so comfortable, so thoroughly, completely comfortable. The kind of comfort that makes you realize how tense you've been holding yourself. The kind that makes all the small discomforts of the week seem worthwhile, because they led to this. Just before sleep took me completely, I had one last conscious thought. This is enough. This quiet room, this clean bed, this rainy night, this life I'm building for myself, one small ritual at a time. It's enough. I'm enough. And with that thought, soft as the sheets around me, I let go. Let sleep rise up like warm water. Let the rain sing me its lullaby. Friday night, clean sheets, rain on the window, peace in my heart. I slept deeply that night, the kind of sleep that feels like falling into something soft and being held there. No dreams I could remember, just rest. Just the body doing what it was meant to do, renewing itself in darkness and silence. The rain fell all night, just as I'd imagined it would. Steady and faithful, a constant presence outside my window. I didn't hear it consciously, but I knew it was there. Part of the night, part of the comfort, part of the ritual. When I woke the next morning, the rain had softened to a mist. The light through my curtains was gray and gentle, and I felt more rested than I had in weeks. I lay in my clean sheets for a long time before getting up. There was no reason to hurry, nowhere to be, nothing demanding my attention. Just Saturday morning, stretching ahead of me like a gift. Eventually, I made coffee, sat by the window and watched the mist hover over the city. Thought about maybe going to the farmer's market later, or maybe just staying in and reading. Both options felt equally appealing. Both options felt like exactly what I needed. But that's another story for another time. Tonight's story was about clean sheets, about small rituals of care, about learning to be gentle with yourself after a long week, about the profound comfort of simple things done with intention. And now, dear listener, wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable too. I hope your sheets are soft and your room is safe. I hope the rain outside, real or imagined, is singing you towards sleep. You made it through another week. You deserve rest. You deserve clean sheets and warm blankets and the deep peace of Friday night. Close your eyes now. Let your body grow heavy. Let sleep rise up to meet you. Good night.